Well, the dangerous idea that Geoffery Robertson brought to this festival is that the Pope should be held accountable for the systematic sexual abuse of children by Catholic priests. Tonight's first question is on that issue, and it comes from Stephanie Seaton.
Geoffery, people and organisations can be prosecuted for knowingly withholding information from police and or hindering criminal investigations. How is it that the Catholic Church manages to avoid prosecution for hiding clergy who are alleged to have been abusing children?
The Catholic Church avoids prosecution because it deals with these matters under canon law. First of all, and my researches show that the Vatican has trafficked in paedophile priests. If a paedophile priest is caught in Belgium, very often they're not handed over to the national law. They're moved silently to some place in Africa or Latin America, and of course they offend again. The other problem with the way the Catholic Church has been operating, and I stress this is the Vatican, the command centre of the Catholic Church, has been refusing to hand over paedophile priests to law enforcement agencies. There was a famous case a few years ago where a bishop in France was actually convicted for not allowing a paedophile priest or not handing him over to the authorities. He went on and he raped more children. And we've had three legal inquiries in Ireland where they found that abuse in Catholic boys' schools was endemic. It happened, that was their word. It happened all the time. In Belgium, it's been admitted to be endemic in every parish. In Germany, in Malta, in the Philippines, tens of thousands of children have been raped, let's not mince words, children can't give consent, by paedophile priests. And what I've been calling for accountability is that I want the Vatican to accept the rules of the Convention on the Rights of Children, which every country in the world has signed, except for America, which doesn't sign conventions. And then we can, because that says that the Church has to put the interests of children first, above the reputational wealth of the Church, that there has to be a zero-tolerance policy for Catholic priests who molest children, one strike against a child and you're out, and there has to be mandatory reporting, namely reporting to the police whenever a bishop gets evidence. Now, the Pope has come some distance. In Easter, he said, this is petty gossip. It's not petty and it's not gossip. A few weeks ago in Britain, at last, he offered an apology for what he called the unspeakable crimes of my clergy. He's got to go further, I think.
Well, I'm not going to let you go further right at the moment because we've got other panellists. So I want to hear from Paul Kelly on this subject.
Well, I think the question, Tony, is exactly how the Pope is to be held accountable and what the fundamental issue is. Is the fundamental issue child sexual abuse, or is the fundamental issue the Catholic Church? I mean, the point about this is that child sexual abuse is a universal problem. It arises in families, tribes, cultures. In fact, it arises in virtually every male-dominated institution of the 20th century, whether one's talking about boarding schools, various religious denominations, the Boy Scouts. Now, the question is this. Are we interested primarily in the problem of child sexual abuse or targeting the Catholic Church, making a political decision to select the Catholic Church and target the Catholic Church? Now, there's also a second issue here which I think is more important. It's been suggested by some that the Pope should be put in the dock on this in the international criminal justice system. Now, the point I'd make about this is the international criminal justice system is for war crimes. That's what it's for. It's for leaders and tyrants and generals who incite and plan genocide or war crimes en masse. The point to make about the Pope is that the Pope has not raped any children. The Pope has not organised child sexual abuse. He actually opposes this evil, and of course it is an evil, and there have been cover-ups. The real question is whether international law should be stretched sufficiently to put the Pope in the dock, when these measures are essentially for war criminals. And I think you've got to ask yourself, what would be the consequences if this was to happen? Well, this would define the international criminal justice system. I think it would discredit international law. It would damage the International Criminal Court. It would lead to divisions internationally. But above all, I argue that it would do nothing for the victims of child sexual abuse.
I want to hear from the rest of our panellists. I know Geoffery Robertson's burning to get back to that question, but I do want to hear Tariq Ali on this briefly.
Well, I think the church is a special institution and it has a head. And the head of the Catholic Church is called the Pope. So when within this institution you have a breach of the liberties of children, then someone has to be answerable. And there's absolutely no doubt, Geoffrey's right on this, that the Vatican has been engaging in a huge cover-up over the last 3, 4, God knows how many decades, country after country. And Paul, you're right, it's not only the Catholic Church. There was a big, in the 70s at the Kincora Boys' Home in Ulster, Protestant priests and Protestants behaved in exactly the same way, which doesn't make it justifiable for the Catholics to carry on doing it. So someone has to be answerable. Whether the Pope is tried, in which court he's tried, is an open question. But I think that, some questions have to be answered, and the Pope is the person to answer them, just because he leads this church. But previous popes should have been held accountable too. I mean, the other problem is that this goes on the one hand, massive hypocrisy, and at the same time the church says that homosexuality is impermissible.
Lenore, do you have any thoughts on whether the Pope should be accountable?
I'm not sure about the Pope being accountable, but I think mandatory reporting is obviously needed. I mean, my sons are Boy Scouts, and if there was a pedophile Boy Scout leader, I would definitely want him to be handed over to the authorities, not just talking to whoever the head of the Boy Scouts is.
Righty.
I think that rape is still a stigma in society. It's there's a stereotype that rape only happens between certain circumstances, war, conflict, and there's been so much push under the carpet. I'd like to see the role of communities putting pressure at the local parish level where this happens, because I think if you keep pushing on the top and you don't push on the bottom, it's not going to get somewhere.
Do you think it's wrong to push at the top?
It's okay, but you're not going to get anywhere, because the conversation's limited to very clever lawyers like Geoffrey up there, right? You need the community down there to start pushing. And you need mums like myself and Lenore to be aware and to be active and campaigning on this, putting pressure on the perpetrators.
All right, there's